Dung looked up first. He had been cutting timber on the low workbench outside when the sky changed, not gradually, the way afternoon clouds usually build, but all at once, the way mountain weather moves when it has decided. He looked at the tree line. He looked at the color of the light. He set down his saw. "Rain," he said, loud. The single word that on a construction site means everything else. Jack heard it from inside the half-built frame. Tu Tien heard it from the garden, where she had been measuring the stone path. They did not need to be told what to do. 3 months of building in the countryside had taught them the specific language of a coming downpour, the smell of it, the drop in temperature, the way the leaves on the banana trees turn their pale undersides up like hands catching the first drops. The timber had to come in first. "The planks on the left," Jack said. He was already moving. "I have them," Tu Tien said. She was already there. Dung lifted the heaviest beam himself without asking for help, the way men of a certain age and a certain build do things, not from pride but from efficiency, because calculating whether someone else can carry it takes longer than just carrying it. He moved it under the covered section in 2 trips. Jack caught the other end on the second trip without being asked. The rain arrived before they finished. Not a warning drizzle, the full weight of it, all at once. The way the highlands deliver rain like the sky has been holding it for weeks and has finally run out of patience. In 30 seconds, the bare earth of the construction site turned from dust to mud. In 60 seconds, the mud was moving. "The high-in," Tu Tien said sharply. "The north side, there's no roof there yet." Jack was already looking. The unfinished section of the veranda, the part they had planned to roof next week, was open to the sky. Water was sheeting across the new concrete floor and running toward the wall junction where it had nowhere to go. Tu Tien, the plastic sheets. In the blue barrel. She ran. The first 20 minutes were controlled chaos. Tu Tien pulled plastic sheeting from the storage barrel, and Jack climbed the scaffold in the rain, not the full scaffold, just the lower section, 4 meters up, and they stretched the sheet across the open veranda frame, while Dung held the ladder and called out adjustments that were sometimes useful and sometimes just the kind of noise that older men make when younger. People are doing dangerous things, and they cannot stop them. The sheet caught. Jack tied it off on both sides. The water stopped sheeting across the new floor. He came down the ladder. His shirt was soaked through. His glasses were useless. He pushed them up and left them on his forehead because there was nothing to see clearly in this rain anyway. Only shapes and the next problem. The next problem was already visible. At the eastern corner of the garden, the corner where the stone path turned toward the frangipani tree Mrs. Ly had planted 4 days ago, the ground had given way. Not dramatically, not a collapse, just a quiet surrender of soft, new soil that had been poured 2 weeks earlier and had not yet had time to settle and bond. A section roughly 2 meters long had slid downhill, taking the small retaining edge with it and leaving a raw brown gap where the garden path had been. The frangipani tree was leaning, not fallen, leaning 15 degrees off vertical, roots partially exposed on the uphill side, the small trunk wet and pale in the gray rain light. Jack stood at the edge of the gap and looked at it. He thought about his mother's hand on the sapling when she planted it, the way she had packed the soil around the base with both palms, twice, the way you press something into place when you want it to stay. He thought about Dung's ears going red when he had seen her do it. "Back," Jack called. Dung came up beside him. He looked at the gap. He looked at the tree. He did not say anything for a moment. "Dig from the downhill side first," he said finally. "Compact the base, then pack new soil around the roots before you straighten it. If you straighten it before the base is solid, it will just lean again." "I know. I'm telling you anyway." Jack picked up the nearest shovel. They worked in the rain for 40 minutes. Tu Tien dug drainage channels along the uphill edge of the garden with a smaller spade, narrow cuts in the soil that gave the water somewhere to go, instead of pooling and pushing at the soft ground. She worked fast and low, her knees in the mud, the gray hoodie dark with rain, hair plastered flat against her neck where it had escaped the tie. Jack dug the base. Dung carried compacted earth in a flatboard and packed it in layers the way he had packed foundations all his working life, not by feel but by sound, listening to the change in the thud of the tamper as the soil went from loose to dense. Somewhere in the middle of it, Jack slipped. Not badly. He caught himself on one knee in the mud, one hand down. He stayed there for a second, breathing, checking nothing was wrong, and when he looked up, Tu Tien was already looking at him from across the drainage channel. Spade paused, eyebrows up. "I'm fine," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to digging. Dung had not stopped packing. In the mountains, Dung said, to no one in particular, "They say the land tests you before it accepts you. If you run from the first rain, the land knows. If you stay and fix what breaks, the land knows that too." Jack got back up. He picked up the shovel. "Is that true?" Tu Tien asked. "I don't know," Dung said, "but it sounds true," which is usually enough. The rain slowed at the 2-hour mark. Not suddenly, it thinned. The way good rain ends, pulling back gradually as if reconsidering. The light changed. The gray became a lighter gray, then a washed-out gold. Somewhere in the tree line, a bird made a sound, the particular sound birds make in the first minutes after heavy rain, as if checking whether the world is still there. Jack straightened the frangipani tree. He did it slowly, both hands on the thin trunk, feeling the resistance of the newly compacted soil against the roots. The tree came vertical. He held it there for a moment. Then he packed the last of the soil around the base with both palms twice, the way his mother had done it, and stepped back. The tree stood straight, small, pale, dripping, very much alive. Dung was standing a few meters back. He was looking at the tree. His face was doing the thing it did when something mattered, and he had decided not to say so. He looked at Jack. Jack looked back. Neither of them spoke. Tu Tien had already gone to make tea. They sat on the covered section of the veranda, the part that had a roof, the part that had held with 3 cups of green tea, and the particular exhaustion of people who have spent 2 hours solving a problem that did not exist this morning. The farm was quiet, the mud was settling, the plastic sheet over the open veranda moved slightly in the breeze that had come in behind the rain. Jack looked at his hands. Mud under every fingernail, a new scrape across his left palm from the fall, the calluses from 4 months of building, and now on top of them the particular rawness of 2 hours in wet soil. He turned them over, looked at both sides, put them back down on his knees. "How bad is the drainage long term?" he said. "Not bad," Dung said. "The channels Tu Tien cut today, if you extend them another 3 meters to the east, the water has a clean path off the property. 1 day's work, 2 at most. I'll do it this week." "We'll do it," Tu Tien said. She was looking out at the garden, at the stone path that was damaged and would need releveling, at the small frangipani tree standing straight in the wet earth. Jack followed her gaze. "Mom doesn't know," he said. "No. She'll see it when she comes back. She'll see a straight tree in good soil." Tu Tien said, "That's all she needs to see." Dung drank his tea. He said nothing, but his hand, wrapped around the small cup, was very steady. "Next week," Jack said, "we start the flooring. The timber back sourced, it needs to be sealed before we lay it, or the wet season will crack it within a year." "I know how to seal timber," Dung said. Slightly offended, "I know you know. I'm making a list." "Make your list. I'll seal the timber. And the drainage channels. And the drainage channels. And the jack." Dung set down his cup. He looked at the younger man with the particular patience of someone who has been building things for 30 years and has learned that the most important part of any construction is not the next step but the breath between steps. Drink your tea. Jack drank his tea. The farm steamed gently in the returning warmth. The sky was clearing from the west, pale gold pushing through the gray, the light that comes after rain in the highlands and makes everything look newly made. The mud on the path would dry, the soil around the frangipani would settle, the drainage channels would be dug. Tu Tien refilled all 3 cups without being asked. "Bak," she said. "Yes, the thing you said about the land testing you." Dung picked up his refilled cup. "Yes. Do you think it's true? Really?" He considered this for a longer moment than Jack expected. "I think," Dung said carefully, "that the land does not test anyone. The land just is what it is, soil and slope and water. The testing is what we do to ourselves when things go wrong." He looked at the tree. "Whether we stay, whether we fix it, whether we drink tea after." He paused. "The land does not care, but we find out who we are." Tu Tien looked at the tree for a moment. Then she looked at Jack. Jack looked at the mud on his hands and the tea in his cup and the farm around them damaged in 3 places and already being repaired, and thought about a man who had called his mother on the 2nd ring and a woman who had picked up before he said a word. He thought about what gets built in 2 hours in the rain that cannot be built any other way. "Next week," he said quietly. "Flooring." "Next week," Dung agreed. "Flooring." The tea was still warm. The sky was still clearing. Somewhere at the eastern corner of the garden, a small tree stood straight in fresh soil, holding,